Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. This is the first rest day of the 24 Vuelta a España, brought to you by Lupine Lights. Lupine Lights, the finest lights that I've ever ridden throughout my career, and I've been riding them since 2019. They have the app on the phone to be able to adjust all of your settings, 3 different settings to pick from, of course, so you can run slow, medium, and high when you're out riding. And then, of course, with the app, you can adjust the voltage of the light to dim it or have it stronger so your battery lasts longer. German made, so you know the quality's high. If you want to save 24% on your next order, make sure you use the code BlueBindLights24. Now, let's get into the rest day. What do I want to talk about? Okay, the highlights from yesterday's Stage 9 has to be when we come into the rest day. Is Primož Roglic in trouble? Could he be in trouble, Primož Roglic? Well, it looked like a hard Stage 9 on Primož Roglic and the whole Bora Hansgrohe squad. But, of course, Lipovic looked pretty good, trying to save the day there for Bora Hansgrohe. And Felix Gall came for AG2R, riding strong on the front for Ben O'Connor, who was in the race leader's red jersey. But when we start looking at all of the stages throughout 1 through 9, well, right now, anybody can win this Vuelta a España. It's completely open. If Primož Roglic doesn't come up to the first page rider ability that he has when Ben O'Connor took the stage victory on Stage 6, and everyone lost massive time to Ben O'Connor when he gained 6.5 minutes on the peloton and put himself over 4 minutes in the race leader's general classification here at the Vuelta a España. I told you, Primož Roglic has to be first page rider, especially if Ben O'Connor's Tour de France form when he was 4th at the Tour de France and his Giro d'Italia form has arrived here at the Vuelta a España. This guy could win the Vuelta a España right now if Primož Roglic doesn't come back up to those sharp form. Now, when we start looking at Stage 9, that was the beginning of the mountain stages, and Bora Hansgrohe had to ride all the way through Stage 9, and AG2R did it tactically beautiful. I love the interview from Ben O'Connor where he said his team never panicked. They rode the first part of the stage fantastic. They weren't worried about Adam Yates, who was way down at over 9.5 minutes down on the general classification when they let 26 guys go up in that group. I like that move. I thought that was fine. Sometimes if you're listening to some of the commentators, they're panicking, worrying about whether or not if it was good to let Adam Yates get back on the general classification. But at that moment in Stage 9 at this year's Vuelta a España, it was the time that a big group was going to go. It was going to be hard to control it. And there was always going to be a threat for someone on the general classification to be in that move. We saw David Gaudu, who was a threat on GC, up there. And we also saw, of course, Adam Yates, who soloed and won the stage and put time into all the GC guys. But he's still 7th on the general classification. And we're looking at him at 5 minutes and 30 seconds back on the GC. So Ben O'Connor's right. They rode it perfectly. Now, he didn't say exactly right in his interview on how the stage went because he was happy with how his form went, and his form has come up. His form's riding good, and he's riding with those best guys. But what saved everything was Primož Roglic riding bad. When they went up the last and final climb of yesterday's Stage 9, the Hasianas climb, well, that was the point in time where Bora Hansgrohe's Primož Roglic just needed to tack and light things up. If he was up there with Enric Mas from Movistar, those two riders would gain a ton of time on the GC guys back there because Mas would have went over the top with Primož Roglic pulling on the descent. It wouldn't have been just the Movistar rider doing the whole descent on his own, and it wouldn't have been the Movistar rider doing the whole climb on his own. So the time of a minute that they made up back there on Felix Gall and Ben O'Connor from AG2R, that time might have been minute and 20 seconds, minute and a half even, and then they don't bring back time on the descent either. So we see Primož Roglic take a huge chunk of time of a minute and a half, I believe, out of Ben O'Connor if he had good legs, and Enric Mas would have taken time too. That means, of course, that Adam Yates would have lost even more time because Adam Yates lost about 2 minutes going up that climb to Enric Mas when they went up the final climb. So that means Adam Yates' time gets a little more buffered and looks a little bit better right now when he's 7th on the general classification too, because at 5 minutes and 30 seconds, well, he's only about 1 minute and 40 down on Primož Roglic time. So everyone right now in the top 8, is going to go all the way down to Felix Gall from AG2R. They have not 1, but 2 riders in the top 8 because Ben O'Connor, as I said, is AG2R and Felix Gall is. So at this moment, maybe the strongest team we're looking at the Vuelta a España is AG2R. At least the strongest when you look at their position in the peloton, having 1st and 8th, and still having a strong team that started the last climb in yesterday's Stage 9 with multiple numbers in that front group. Bora Hansgrohe, they look okay too. But as I told you, after stage 6, Bora Hansgrohe's team's not looking any better than anybody else's team here at the Vuelta a España. So Ben O'Connor has a shot because Primož Roglic doesn't have that amazing lead out going into the final climb. If his form is to return, and it starts getting better and better here once we get into stage 10, because everything from stage 10 all the way to the finish of this year's Vuelta a España, minus stage 17, the only sprinter stage left here at this year's Vuelta a España, everything's going to be a difficult stage to control. So when we start looking over at AG2R, Ben O'Connor, where they're booking in 1 through 8, I'd be surprised if anyone outside of 8th on the general classification can win this year's Vuelta a España, even if they are to get into a break and gain a ton of time and be given some kind of huge leash where someone from outside the top 8 jumps into the hot seat and is wearing the race leader's red jersey here at the Vuelta a España. Everyone outside of top 8 have not gone good enough to where they're not going to lose a lot of time in the mountain stages that would follow whatever kind of leash stage that they were given where they put themselves in the race leader's red jersey. But everyone in the top 8 looks pretty good, with the exception that everyone in the top 8 also had a bad stage. Primož Roglic, remember they had stage 6, and after stage 6, when Ben O'Connor took back 6.5 minutes on that stage 6, well, I told you afterwards when the camera were on Primož Roglic that he looked either tired or very upset and frustrated with how that stage went. I couldn't tell you which it was, but now I start asking myself, was Primož Roglic bad on stage 6 and then again bad on yesterday's stage 9? That's a possibility. I thought it was maybe more frustration, but I certainly made it clear that afterwards when he gave the interview on stage 6 that he looked like he was fatigued on that day. So it could be Primož Roglic has had not 1, but 2 bad days in the first 9 stages here at the Vuelta a España. He has said many times in his interview, of course, that his Bora Hansgrohe team can't control everything. We saw that on stage 6. We saw it falling apart a little bit on yesterday's stage 9 as they were losing time with everybody pulling from their teammates throughout that whole course and losing time to Adam Yates. So they have some dilemma here with Primož Roglic and their whole team. When I start looking at Vlasov, of course, crashed on one of the stages when we're talking about Primož Roglic winning stage 8. He crashed at the bottom there, so that cost him some time. But he wasn't good in yesterday's stage 9 either, and that could be related to the crash he had in stage 8. That means Primož Roglic, who's already lost Danny Martinez, yes, he's still in the race, but he hasn't been riding very good. Vlasov isn't riding very good, and that's his 2 main lieutenants when the Vuelta a España started. Now, luckily for Primož Roglic, Lipovets has had some good days, and he was solid in yesterday's stage 9. But when we start looking at the rest of the team, it's Giovanni who's been the surprise, being capable of riding deeper into the mountain stages than I thought capable. But right now, Vlasov and Danny Martinez are not riding that good, and those were his main lieutenants to be able to come into the last and final climb of any mountain stage and then light it up on a summit mountain stage. But Vlasov hasn't been that great. So with the loss of that and the loss of Danny Martinez, Primož Roglic's form not being 100% every day here at the Vuelta a España, there's a lot of questions. Primož Roglic again had commented that he's not 100% here. He's feeling okay, but his back is giving him some problems too, so he's not 100%. So we don't know if we're going to see that first page. So when we start looking at that top 8 of the general classification, if I'm AG2R starting this second week here, the Vuelta a España, I'm still keeping my eye on Primož Roglic and Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe. But at this moment, I'm thinking you got to keep an eye specifically on how Primož Roglic looks so you're not giving away too much time. But anyone outside the top 8 of the general classification, or top 7 if you're AG2R, because 8 is Felix Gall. So anyone outside of the top 7 of the general classification, they can go up the road in the breakaway in this second week here of the Vuelta a España. And if I'm AG2R, I'm still looking at Bora Hansgrohe to have to control the pace. I want to wear all their guys down so that when we hit any kind of final climb here in these next coming stages, that Ben O'Connor only has to keep an eye on Primož Roglic, and if his form has returned, well, you don't want Primož Roglic having some super lead out coming into the climb with a 4-rider train in front of him that guys are just sprinting like crazy, blowing the peloton all up, and then Primož Roglic can launch himself. You want his team completely tired when you hit the final last climb, then Primož Roglic has to light it up himself, which will take at least 20-30 seconds off of the time when you reach the summit of the climb from Ben O'Connor to Primož Roglic if he is able to return to his good form. And of course, if Ben O'Connor can keep his form, because Ben O'Connor, he's had some bad days too, right? But it wasn't on yesterday's stage 9, and it certainly wasn't on stage 6. So Ben O'Connor's looking hot. Now, when I look at this top 8 again, I want to cover one more thing before I let you go. The only rider that I see in the top 8 that has rode good from stages 1 all the way to the stage 9, maybe we'll take it from stage 2 all the way to stage 9, will be Enric Mas. Enric Mas has been consistently strong on the pedals with his fitness here at the Vuelta a España. Of course, he had the descending little mishap there when he high-sided his bike, but he saved it going down the descent on yesterday's stage 9. But in terms of fitness, Enric Mas is the only one that I see in the top 8, that has been consecutively good throughout every stage of the Vuelta a España. That's why it's so open, and that's why it's such a fantastic race here at the Vuelta a España in 2024. There is no dominant Jumbo-Visma team like we saw in last year's 2023, so anyone in the top 8 can win this year's Vuelta a España. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll bring you all the details and the butterfly effect of the stages to come here at the 24 Vuelta a España. See you guys on the next edition real soon.